6 weeks after I buried my husband of 34 years, I was finally starting to remember how to breathe again. The grief counselor had told me that was normal. 6 weeks was when the shock started to wear off, and the real work of mourning began. I was sitting in our living room in Greenwich, the same living room where Elliot and I had hosted countless dinner parties and Christmas gatherings, when my phone rang with a number I recognized immediately. Laurent Beauchamp, Elliot's boss, the CEO of Devereaux Aerospace Systems, the company where my husband had worked for the last 14 years of his life. My hand trembled slightly as I answered. Laurent and I weren't close. We knew each other only through corporate events and the occasional company dinner, but he'd sent a beautiful arrangement of white lilies to Elliot's funeral and a handwritten note expressing his condolences. I assumed this was a follow-up call, maybe something about Elliot's final paycheck or benefits paperwork. "Hello, Mr. Beauchamp," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause on the other end, and when he spoke, his voice sounded nothing like the composed, authoritative CEO I'd known for over a decade. It was shaking, actually trembling. "Mrs. Radcliffe, Sutton, I need you to come to my office, right now, today, as soon as you possibly can." My heart began to pound. "Is something wrong? Is this about Elliot's—" "Please," he interrupted, and I could hear him take a ragged breath. "I discovered something on Elliot's corporate computer, something you need to see before it becomes public knowledge, before anyone else finds it. I'm conducting the standard post-mortem audit of his files. It's protocol when an employee passes, and I found—" Another pause. "Sutton, I need you to see this in person. I can't explain over the phone." The fear in his voice made my stomach drop. Laurent Beauchamp was a self-made billionaire, a man who'd built a $340 million aerospace company from nothing. He'd immigrated from France at 25 with barely any English and turned himself into one of the most respected CEOs in Connecticut. This was a man who negotiated multi-million-dollar defense contracts with military generals. What could possibly make him sound this shaken? "What is it?" I whispered. "Please, just tell me." "Not over the phone," he said firmly. "And Sutton, please don't tell Declan yet, not until after you've seen this. This needs to come from you, not from me or anyone else. Do you understand? Declan, my 32-year-old son." Why would Laurent specifically mention not telling Declan? What could be on Elliot's computer that involved our son? "I'll be there in an hour," I managed to say. I drove to Stamford in a complete daze, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind raced through possibilities. Had Elliot been involved in something illegal? Corporate espionage? Financial fraud? But that made no sense. Elliot was the most honest, straightforward man I'd ever known. 34 years of marriage, and he'd never even cheated on his taxes. He was predictable, responsible, almost boring in his reliability. That was one of the things I'd loved most about him. The drive from Greenwich to Stamford normally took about 30 minutes, but traffic on I-95 was mercifully light, and I arrived at the Devereaux Aerospace Building in 40 minutes. The modern glass structure rose 15 stories into the October sky, and I'd been here dozens of times for company events. But I'd never felt the sense of dread I felt walking through those doors today. Laurent was waiting for me in the lobby. That alone was extraordinary. CEOs don't wait in lobbies for anyone. He looked like he'd aged 10 years since I'd last seen him at Elliot's funeral 6 weeks ago. His normally immaculate silver hair looked slightly disheveled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that I'd never noticed before. "Sutton," he said quietly, taking my hand. His palm was warm and slightly damp. "Thank you for coming so quickly. Please, follow me." We rode the elevator to the 15th floor in complete silence. I watched the numbers climb, each one making my heart beat faster. Laurent stood beside me, his jaw clenched, staring straight ahead. When the doors opened, he led me past his assistant's desk. She looked up with a sympathetic expression that made my anxiety spike even higher, and into his private office. The office was exactly as I remembered it, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Long Island Sound, dark wood furniture, expensive art on the walls. But today, the beauty of it barely registered. Laurent closed the door behind us and locked it. He'd never done that in all the times I'd been here for company dinners or holiday parties. "Please sit," he said, gesturing to one of the leather chairs facing his massive desk. Would you like some water? Coffee? Just tell me what's going on, I said. My voice came out sharper than I intended, but I couldn't stand the suspense anymore. Laurent walked around his desk and sat down heavily in his chair. He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw genuine pain in his eyes. Whatever this was, it was hurting him too. Sutton, I've known you for 14 years. I've always had tremendous respect for you and Elliot. He was one of my most trusted employees, and I considered him not just an employee, but a friend. He paused. What I'm about to show you is going to devastate you. I debated whether to show you at all, whether it would be kinder to just destroy the evidence and let you keep your memories intact. But I decided you deserve to know the truth. You deserve to be prepared before she tries to contact you. She? My voice was barely a whisper. Who is she? Laurent turned his computer monitor toward me. On the screen was a file folder labeled Seattle Personal. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I found this buried in Elliot's corporate computer files, Laurent said quietly. It was hidden under multiple password-protected layers. I only found it because our IT department has master access for these audits. He moved his mouse to click on the folder. Sutton, I'm so sorry. The folder opened, and I saw rows and rows of image files, hundreds of them. Laurent clicked on the first one, dated March 2008, and my entire world tilted sideways. It was a photograph of Elliot, my Elliot, standing on a beach somewhere with brilliant blue water behind him, his arms wrapped around a beautiful woman with long, dark hair. She was wearing a sundress that showed her pregnant belly, maybe 6 or 7 months along. Elliot was kissing her cheek, one hand resting protectively on her stomach, and the expression on his face was one of pure joy. March 2008, 17 years ago. Declan had been 15 years old. We'd been married for 23 years at that point. No, I whispered. The word came out automatically, a reflex of denial. No, that can't be. But Laurent was already clicking to the next photo. Same woman, now holding a newborn baby wrapped in a pink blanket. Elliot beside her in what looked like a hospital room, tears streaming down his face as he gazed at the infant. The date stamp read, July 2008. My legs stopped working. If Laurent hadn't been there to catch me, I would have collapsed onto the floor. He helped me into the chair, his hand steady on my arm. Breathe, Sutton, he said gently. Just breathe. But I couldn't breathe, because he was clicking through more photos now, and I was watching my husband's secret life unfold before my eyes. Elliot, holding a toddler with dark curly hair, teaching her to walk. Elliot at a little girl's birthday party, helping her blow out candles shaped like the number 3. Elliot, pushing that same girl on a swing set. Elliot, helping her ride a bicycle. Elliot at her elementary school graduation. Elliot at her middle school dance recital. Elliot, living an entire parallel life that I knew nothing about. How? I couldn't form complete sentences. How long? 17 years, Laurent said quietly. Based on the dates of these files, it started in late 2007 and continued until he died. He closed the photo folder and opened another file. Her name is Antonella Scrather. She's a software engineer. They met during a long-term project in Seattle in 2007. The child's name is Maya. She's 16 years old. 16. The same age Declan had been when this all started. I thought back to 2007, trying to remember anything unusual, but there was nothing. Elliot had told me he was working on a major project in Seattle that required him to be on site for several months. I'd never questioned it because Laurent himself had confirmed it at a company dinner. Elliot had come home every few weeks, brought me gifts, told me stories about boring hotel rooms and tedious client meetings. I'd never suspected a thing. There's more, Laurent said, and his voice was so heavy with sorrow that I almost told him to stop. But I needed to know. I needed to see the full extent of the betrayal. He opened an email folder, and I saw years of correspondence between Elliot and this woman, Antonella. I couldn't read them all. There were hundreds, but Laurent had apparently already gone through them because he clicked on specific ones that he'd flagged. The first one, dated August 2008, made me want to vomit. Elliot writing to Antonella, I promise you, once Declan finishes high school, I'll tell Sutton everything. I'll end things properly, and we can be a real family. Maya deserves to have her father full-time, not these stolen weekends. I love you both so much. Just a few more years, I promise. Laurent clicked to another email, dated June 2011. I know I said I'd tell her after Declan graduated, but he's having a hard time adjusting to college, and I can't drop this on Sutton right now. After he graduates, I swear, I just need a little more time. Another one, from March 2015. Declan just got engaged. I can't destroy the family right before his wedding. After he's settled and married, then I'll tell Sutton. Please understand, I'm doing this for everyone's sake. And one more, from January 2024, just 10 months ago. You're right to be angry. I keep making promises I don't keep. The truth is, I don't know how to tell her. 33 years of marriage, and I don't know how to say the words that will destroy her. But I'm getting older. My health isn't what it used to be, and I can't keep living this double life. I need to tell her. I will tell her. Soon. Soon. He died before soon ever came. Laurent pulled up another set of files, financial records. My hands were shaking so badly I had to clasp them together in my lap to keep them still. For the past 17 years, Laurent explained, his voice gentle but firm, Elliot has been transferring $4,000 per month to an account in Antonella's name. He's been paying for Maya's private school tuition, half of Antonella's rent, her car payments, health insurance, everything. $4,000 a month. $48,000 a year. For 17 years. That was over $800,000, and I'd never noticed it missing. Elliot had always handled our finances. I'd trusted him completely. He made good money as a senior engineer, and I'd assumed his careful budgeting and investing was why we were so comfortable financially. How did I not see this? I whispered. How did I not know? Because he was very, very careful, Laurent said. He used corporate accounts for some of it. The apartment he maintained in Bellevue was registered under a shell company that technically existed for business purposes. The travel expenses were always justified as client meetings or project oversight. He was meticulous about covering his tracks. Laurent paused. Sutton, there's one more thing you need to see. I didn't think I could handle one more thing, but Laurent opened another document, and I saw it was a letter. An unfinished letter addressed to me. He was writing this in the weeks before he died, Laurent said quietly. He never finished it. My eyes scanned the words, written in Elliot's precise handwriting that had been converted to a document. Dear Sutton, I don't know how to tell you this, so I'm writing it down first to see if I can find the right words. By the time you read this, you'll know the truth about Seattle, about Antonella, about Maya. I've been a coward for 17 years. And that cowardice has created a situation that will hurt everyone I love. You deserve so much better than what I've given you. You gave up your career, your dreams, everything to support me, and I repaid that sacrifice with lies. The truth is, I love you. I've always loved you. But I also love Antonella, and I love Maya with every fiber of my being. I couldn't choose. I couldn't walk away from either family, so I tried to be enough for both. And in doing so, I failed everyone. My doctor told me last month that my blood pressure is dangerously high. The stress is literally killing me. The guilt is eating me alive from the inside out. I wake up every morning, knowing I'm living a lie, and I go to bed every night, knowing I'm failing as a husband to you and as a father to Maya. I need to tell you the truth before it's too late. I need to face the consequences of my actions. I need to... That's where it ended. Unfinished. Because 3 weeks later, Elliot had collapsed at his desk from a massive heart attack, and by the time the ambulance arrived, he was already gone. I sat in that office for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, staring at that unfinished letter. Laurent sat quietly beside me, not speaking, just letting me process the complete destruction of everything I'd believed about my life. Finally, I found my voice. Why are you showing me this? Why not just delete it all? Laurent looked at me with those tired, sad eyes. Because Antonella is in financial trouble. Without those $4,000 per month, she's about to be evicted. Maya's private school tuition is $32,000 a year, and without Elliot's support, Antonella can't afford it. Sutton, I'm telling you this because I believe she's going to contact you soon. She's going to ask for financial support, or she's going to petition the court for recognition of Maya's paternity and claim a portion of Elliot's estate. You need to be prepared, and you need to tell Declan before he finds out some other way. Declan. Oh God. My son who had worshipped his father. My son who had chosen to go into finance because he'd admired Elliot's analytical mind and steady reliability. My son whose entire image of his father was about to be shattered. How do I tell him? I asked. My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from somewhere far away. How do I tell him that his father lived a double life for half of Declan's lifetime? That he has a 16-year-old sister he never knew existed? I don't know, Laurent admitted. But it has to come from you, and it has to be soon, because Antonella won't wait forever. I stood up on shaking legs. The room tilted slightly, but I steadied myself against the desk. I need copies of everything. The photos, the emails, the financial records, all of it. Laurent had already anticipated this. He handed me a flash drive. It's all here. Sutton, I'm so sorry. Elliot was my friend. But what he did to you, to all of you, is unforgivable. If there's anything I can do, you've done enough, I said. It came out harsher than I meant it to, but I couldn't handle his pity right now. I needed to get out of this office, get to my car, get somewhere private where I could fall apart completely. The drive back to Greenwich was a blur. I don't remember most of it. I know I made it home safely because I woke up the next morning in my bed, still wearing the same clothes, the flash drive clutched in my hand like a talisman of destruction. 3 days later, the doorbell rang. I need to go back to the beginning to explain how I got here. How a woman who thought she had a solid, predictable marriage ended up sitting in her living room, holding evidence of 17 years of lies. I met Elliot Radcliffe when I was 23 years old, fresh out of graduate school with a master's degree in marketing and communications. I was working at a boutique marketing agency in Manhattan, the kind of place where young, ambitious women worked 70-hour weeks and survived on coffee and adrenaline. I loved it. I was good at it. Within 2 years, I'd landed several major luxury brand accounts and was being groomed for a director position. Elliot came to our office for a meeting about a campaign for an aerospace technology client. He was 25, already working as an engineer at a mid-sized firm, and he was the most earnest, awkward person I'd ever met. He stumbled over his presentation. His tie was slightly crooked, and he kept pushing his glasses up his nose in this nervous gesture that I found oddly endearing. After the meeting, he asked if he could buy me coffee to discuss the campaign further. I said yes, even though I knew discussing the campaign wasn't really what he wanted. We were married 2 years later, and Declan was born when I was 25. Those early years were chaotic in the best possible way. Juggling a demanding career with a newborn, Elliot working long hours to establish himself, both of us exhausted but happy. We bought a small house in Westchester, nothing fancy, but it was ours. I kept working, kept building my career, kept climbing that ladder toward the director position I'd been promised. Then, when I was 38 years old, everything changed. Elliot received a major promotion, senior systems engineer with a significant raise and better benefits, but it came with a catch. The position required frequent relocations and extended travel to various project sites. His boss at the time, an older gentleman named Richard, who's long since retired, sat us both down and explained that this was a career-making opportunity, but it would require family flexibility. I remember that conversation so clearly. We were sitting in Richard's office and he was talking to Elliot but looking at me, and I understood exactly what he was really saying. He was asking if I was willing to be the supportive wife who sacrificed her own ambitions so her husband could advance his career. Elliot didn't ask me to quit my job. He never demanded it, but he sat there looking torn, and I could see how badly he wanted this opportunity, and I made the decision. I told Richard that we were a team, that we'd make it work. 2 months later, I submitted my resignation to the agency where I'd worked for 15 years, where I'd built my reputation and my client list, where I'd been 3 months away from that director position. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I could freelance, could build a consulting business, could find work anywhere we moved. But the reality was different. The relocations were frequent. Sometimes we'd be in a city for only a year before Elliot's next project required another move. By the time Declan was in high school, we'd lived in 6 different states. I tried to maintain some professional identity through sporadic consulting work, but mostly I became what Richard had asked me to become, the supportive wife. And I didn't resent it. Not really. Or maybe I did, sometimes, late at night when Elliot was traveling and I was alone in whatever temporary city we were living in, but I pushed those feelings down because this was what marriage meant. This was what partnership looked like. You made sacrifices for the people you loved. When Declan was 16, we finally settled permanently in Greenwich, Connecticut. Elliot had taken the position at Devereaux Aerospace, working directly under Laurent Beauchamp, and Laurent had made it clear this was a long-term position with no relocation requirements. I remember feeling such relief. Finally, I could put down roots. Finally, I could rebuild some kind of career or at least establish a real social network. But by then, I was 51 years old, and the marketing world had moved on without me. The digital revolution had transformed everything, and my experience felt outdated. I took a few consulting projects here and there, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. Instead, I threw myself into being the perfect corporate wife, hosting dinner parties for Laurent and other Devereaux executives, organizing charity events, joining the right clubs, making the right connections that would help Elliot's career. And our marriage seemed solid, not passionate anymore. We were in our 50s, after all, and the fire of those early years had mellowed into something more comfortable. Our sex life had become sporadic, maybe once a month if that, but I'd read enough articles in women's magazines to know that was normal for long-term marriages. We still held hands sometimes. We still said, "I love you," every morning and every night. We still enjoyed each other's company, having dinner together, watching British mysteries on television, taking weekend trips to visit Declan in Boston. Elliot was predictable in the best possible way. He never forgot our anniversary, 34 years, and he bought me flowers every single year, always the same pale pink roses that I'd carried at our wedding. He called me every night when he was traveling, usually around 9 o'clock, to tell me about his day. He was attentive to my needs, remembered my favorite foods, knew when I needed space and when I needed company. The traveling had continued even after we settled in Greenwich. Laurent ran a major aerospace company with projects all over the country, and Elliot, as senior systems engineer, was frequently called to troubleshoot problems or oversee critical installations. Seattle was a recurring destination. Devereaux had several major clients in the Pacific Northwest, including some classified military contracts. Elliot would typically spend 2 or 3 weekends per month traveling, sometimes more during critical project phases. I never questioned it. Why would I? Laurent himself had confirmed these projects at company dinners. I'd overhear Laurent and Elliot discussing technical details about Seattle installations, about challenges with specific clients, about timeline pressures. It all made perfect sense. Looking back now, I could see how carefully it had all been constructed. Elliot never traveled on major holidays. He was always home for Thanksgiving, Christmas, my birthday, our anniversary. He never missed important family events. When Declan got married 2 years ago, Elliot was there, beaming with pride, giving a toast about how proud he was of his son, how blessed he was to have such a wonderful family. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have a husband who prioritized family despite his demanding career. What a fool I'd been. The signs had probably been there all along, but I'd been too trusting to see them. The way Elliot sometimes seemed distracted, even when he was physically present. The way he'd become extremely protective of his phone in recent years, always keeping it face down, always taking calls in another room. The way he'd sometimes come home from Seattle trips with a strange sadness in his eyes that I'd attributed to work stress. I'd asked him once, maybe 5 years ago, if everything was okay. He'd seemed more withdrawn than usual, and I'd wondered if he was having some kind of midlife crisis. He'd held my hand and told me he was just tired, just stressed about a difficult project, that he was getting older and feeling the weight of responsibility. I'd believed him. I'd made his favorite dinner and suggested we take a vacation together, just the two of us, to reconnect. We'd gone to Italy that summer, 2 weeks in Tuscany, staying at beautiful villas, drinking wine, eating incredible food, making love more frequently than we had in years. I'd thought we were rebuilding something, strengthening our bond. Now I realized he'd probably been racked with guilt, trying to assuage his conscience by being the attentive husband for a few weeks before returning to his double life. The financial aspect was what really stunned me. $4,000 a month for 17 years. I'd trusted Elliot completely with our finances. He'd always been meticulous about money, carefully investing, maintaining detailed spreadsheets, explaining our retirement plans and our portfolio diversification. Every few months, he'd sit me down and review everything, show me the account balances, explain the investment strategies, make sure I understood where we stood financially. How had he hidden $48,000 a year? The answer, according to the documents Laurent showed me, was disturbingly simple. Elliot made a good salary, around $200,000 annually as a senior engineer. With bonuses and stock options, some years he earned closer to $250,000. We lived comfortably, but not extravagantly. Our house in Greenwich was nice, but not ostentatious, probably worth around $1.2 million. We drove reliable cars, took reasonable vacations, had a healthy retirement portfolio. $4,000 a month out of $16,000 or more in monthly income wasn't difficult to hide when you controlled all the accounts and your wife trusted you implicitly. He'd been smart about it, too. Some of the money had been funneled through legitimate business expenses. The Bellevue apartment was registered under a consulting LLC that technically existed for project-related purposes. Some had come from bonuses that I didn't know the full amount of. Some had simply been careful skimming from accounts I rarely checked because I trusted him to manage everything responsibly. The life insurance policy was another knife in my heart. $2 million, with me listed as the sole beneficiary. Elliot had set it up 15 years ago, right around the time Maya would have been a toddler. He'd told me it was to protect me, to make sure I'd be taken care of if anything happened to him. At the time, I'd been touched by his thoughtfulness. Now I understood that it was guilt money. He couldn't officially provide for both families, couldn't put Antonella on any paperwork without risking exposure, so he'd made sure that at least I would be financially secure. It was the least he could do after asking me to sacrifice my career for his. Sitting in my bedroom 3 days after Laurent showed me everything, holding that flash drive, I realized something that made my chest ache with a different kind of pain. I'd spent the last 16 years of my marriage competing with another woman without even knowing she existed. Every time Elliot made love to me, was he thinking of her? Every time he said, "I love you," was he saying it to both of us in his mind? Every anniversary gift, every birthday card, every moment of tenderness, had any of it been real, or had it all been contaminated by his divided heart? The doorbell rang, pulling me out of these dark thoughts. It was 3:15 in the afternoon, a Tuesday. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a moment I considered not answering, but something compelled me to stand up, to walk down the stairs, to look through the peephole. There was a woman standing on my porch. She looked to be in her mid-40s, with long dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing jeans and a simple blue sweater. Her eyes were red-rimmed, like she'd been crying. And next to her, half hidden behind her mother, was a teenage girl with dark curly hair and Elliot's exact same brown eyes. I knew who they were before I even opened the door. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob. Every instinct told me to walk away, to pretend I wasn't home, to avoid this confrontation for just a little longer. But I'd never been a coward, and I wasn't going to start now. I opened the door. The woman looked at me with an expression that mirrored my own pain. Exhausted, devastated, barely holding herself together. The girl beside her kept her eyes down, studying her shoes like they were the most fascinating thing in the world. "Mrs. Radcliffe," the woman said, and I heard a subtle Brazilian accent in her voice. "My name is Antonella Scrather. This is Maya. I know this is terrible timing, and I'm so sorry to come here like this, but we need to talk, please." I should have slammed the door in her face. I should have told her to leave my property and contact my lawyer if she had something to say. But instead, I found myself stepping aside, gesturing for them to come in. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the shell-shocked numbness that had settled over me since seeing those files. Or maybe it was the look on that teenage girl's face, pure misery mixed with fear. They followed me into the living room, the same living room where I'd hosted Laurent Beauchamp and his wife for dinner parties, where Declan had opened Christmas presents, where Elliot and I had celebrated our 30th anniversary just 4 years ago. Antonella sat on the edge of the sofa, her posture rigid with tension. Maya sat beside her, still not looking up. "Would you like some water?" I heard myself ask, slipping into hostess mode like I'd done 1,000 times before. It was absurd, offering refreshments to my dead husband's mistress, but I didn't know what else to do. "No, thank you," Antonella said quietly. "I know you must hate me. You have every right to. But I need you to understand that I didn't know he was still married when we first met. He told me he was divorced." I sat down in the armchair across from them, my hands folded tightly in my lap to keep them from shaking. "When did you figure out he was lying?" Antonella's face crumpled slightly. 3 months into the relationship. I found his wedding ring in his jacket pocket when I was hanging it up. He'd taken it off, but he forgot to hide it that day. When I confronted him, he told me the truth, that he was still married, but the marriage was basically over, that you two were staying together for your son's sake, but planned to divorce once Declan graduated high school. She paused, wiping at her eyes. I believed him. God help me. I believed him because I wanted to. "And when Declan graduated high school?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "What was his excuse then?" "He said Declan was having trouble adjusting to college, that the timing wasn't right, that you'd been having health problems." Antonella looked directly at me now, and I saw genuine remorse in her eyes. There was always another reason, another excuse. By the time I realized he was never going to leave you, Maya was 5 years old, and I was in too deep. I loved him, and more than that, Maya loved him. How do you take away a little girl's father? Maya finally looked up, and the resemblance to Elliot was so striking that it physically hurt to look at her. She had his eyes, his jawline, even the same way of biting her lower lip when she was nervous. A gesture I'd seen Elliot make thousands of times over 34 years. "I didn't know about you," Maya said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not really. Dad told me his divorce had been really bad, that his ex-wife didn't want anything to do with him, that she'd turned his son against him. He said that's why I couldn't meet my brother, why we had to keep our family private. I never questioned it, because why would I? He was my dad. I trusted him." The way she said "dad" made something crack inside my chest. This girl had known Elliot as her father for 16 years. She'd had birthday parties with him, school conferences, bedtime stories, everything that made up a childhood. And it was all built on the same foundation of lies that my marriage had been built on. "How did you find out he died?" I asked. "LinkedIn," Antonella said bitterly. "I saw a post from one of his colleagues offering condolences. That's how I found out the man I'd been with for 17 years was dead. Not a phone call, not an email, nothing. Just a LinkedIn post. He'd never given me any emergency contacts, never introduced me to anyone from his work life in Connecticut. I was completely compartmentalized." She pulled out her phone and showed me a calendar. This was our schedule. He visited every other weekend, sometimes 3 weekends a month during heavy project phases. He'd arrive Friday evening and leave Sunday afternoon. Maya and I built our entire lives around those weekends. I turned down job opportunities that would have required relocation because we were here. I didn't seriously date anyone else because I kept believing his promises that eventually we'd be a real family. I looked at the calendar, at years of highlighted weekends marking Elliot's visits. All those times he'd told me he was traveling for work, troubleshooting problems in Seattle, meeting with clients. All those company dinners where Laurent had unknowingly corroborated Elliot's cover story because there really were projects in Seattle. There really were clients who needed support. Elliot had simply built his double life around legitimate business travel. Did Laurent know? I asked suddenly. Did any of them know? No, Antonella said firmly. I asked Elliot that question many times, especially toward the end when I was getting frustrated with the situation. He swore that no one at Devereaux knew about us. He kept everything completely separate. He even rented the apartment in Bellevue under some kind of business entity so it wouldn't raise red flags if anyone saw the expense. I thought about Laurent's face when he'd shown me those files, the genuine shock and betrayal in his eyes. At least that had been real. At least Elliot hadn't made a fool of his boss along with everyone else. Why are you here? I asked. What do you want from me? Antonella took a deep breath. I need help. Financial help. I'm not proud of this, but I don't have a choice. Elliot was paying for Maya's school. It's $32,000 a year at Lakeside Academy. He was also covering half my rent, which is $2,000 a month plus her health insurance, her activities, everything. Without that support, I can't afford to keep her in that school. I can barely afford to keep us housed. I have 60 days before we're evicted from our apartment. So you want me to pay for the life my husband was secretly funding? I could hear the edge creeping into my voice. You want me to continue supporting his second family? No, Antonella said, and her voice broke. I want Maya to be recognized as Elliot's daughter. I want her to have the same rights as Declan. I want her to inherit from her father's estate the same way her brother will. She deserves that. She didn't choose this situation. The estate, of course. I'd received $2 million from Elliot's life insurance policy, plus we had approximately $800,000 in retirement accounts and investments, plus the house in Greenwich worth around $1.2 million. Total assets of roughly $4 million. And Antonella wanted Maya to have a share. Does she even have a birth certificate with Elliot's name on it? I asked. Antonella pulled out a folder from her bag. I have documentation. Elliot is listed as the father on her birth certificate. We never filed it with Connecticut Vital Records because he was afraid it would somehow get back to you. But it exists. I also have 17 years of financial records showing consistent support from him. I have photos, emails, everything needed to prove paternity if it comes to that. I don't want to fight you in court, Mrs. Radcliffe. I don't want to drag this through a legal battle that will hurt everyone, especially Maya and Declan. But if I have to, I will. Maya deserves to be recognized. I looked at this teenage girl sitting on my sofa, and I tried to hate her. I tried to see her as the evidence of my husband's betrayal, as the physical manifestation of everything that had been stolen from me. But all I could see was a kid who'd lost her father and couldn't even grieve properly because her entire existence had been a secret. What about Declan? I asked. Does he know he has a sister? No, Antonella said. As far as I know, he has no idea. That's another reason I'm here. I wanted to tell you first, before I reached out to him. He deserves to hear this from family, not from a stranger showing up claiming to be his half-sister. The thought of telling Declan made my stomach turn. My son, who had worshipped his father, who had modeled his entire career path after Elliot's example, who had asked Elliot to be his best man at his wedding because they were not just father and son, but best friends. How was I supposed to tell him that the man he admired most in the world had been living a lie for half of Declan's life? I need time, I said. I need to process this, talk to my lawyer, figure out what's legally required. And I need to tell Declan myself, in my own time. I can give you 2 weeks, Antonella said. After that, I have to start taking legal action because I literally won't have a choice. I'll be homeless. 2 weeks, I repeated. It seemed simultaneously like too much time and not enough. Maya spoke up again, her voice small and shaky. I don't want to cause problems. I know this is all really messed up, but he was my dad. I loved him. And now he's gone, and it's like he never existed because I can't tell anyone about him. My friends think my dad is some random businessman who travels a lot. I couldn't go to his funeral. I couldn't even cry at school when it happened because no one knew he was my father. Tears were streaming down her face now. I just want to be able to say he was my dad. I just want people to know he existed in my life. Something in her words broke through the wall I'd been building around my emotions. This girl wasn't trying to steal anything from me. She was just trying to claim what had always been hers, the right to acknowledge her own father. What did he tell you about me? I asked her. About Declan? Maya wiped her eyes. He said his first wife was really bitter about the divorce, that she'd poisoned his son against him. He said Declan wanted nothing to do with him, which was why we couldn't meet. He said he sent child support and tried to be involved, but she blocked all his attempts. She paused. Was any of that true? No, I said quietly. None of it. Declan and his father had a wonderful relationship. We all did. Or at least, I thought we did. Maya's face crumpled. So he lied to me too. About everything. We sat there in silence for a moment. 3 women destroyed by the same man's inability to be honest. The irony wasn't lost on me that Antonella and I were more alike than different. Both of us had sacrificed things for Elliot. Both of us had believed his promises. Both of us had been betrayed. I'm sorry, Antonella said suddenly. I'm so sorry for my part in this. I should have left him years ago when I realized he was never going to leave you. I should have protected Maya from this situation. Instead, I let myself believe his lies because it was easier than facing the truth. Why did you stay? I asked. After you knew he wasn't going to divorce me, why did you keep accepting those weekend visits? Antonella looked down at her hands. Because I loved him. And because Maya loved him. And because I kept thinking that something was better than nothing. He was a good father to her, even if he was only there part-time. He never missed her birthday, never forgot to call her every day he was away. He taught her to code, helped her with her math homework, took her camping and to science museums. She has a whole childhood of memories with him. How do you willingly take that away from your child? I understood that logic, even as it made me furious. She'd chosen to give her daughter partial access to a father over no father at all. In some twisted way, it made sense. Did you know about the money? I asked. Did you know he was taking it from our family finances? I knew he was supporting us, but I didn't know the details. He gave me cash usually, or he'd pay bills directly. I never thought about where it came from. I assumed he had separate finances from his first marriage, that he was successful enough to support 2 households. She laughed bitterly. Another thing I didn't question because I didn't want to know the answer. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Declan. Hey Mom, just checking in. How are you holding up? I can come visit this weekend if you need company. My sweet son. Still worried about me, still trying to take care of me after his father's death. And I was about to shatter his entire world. I need you to leave now, I said, standing up. I'll call you after I talk to Declan. But I need you to give me more than 2 weeks. I need at least a month. Antonella stood too, and Maya followed. I can give you 3 weeks. That's genuinely all the time I have before the eviction proceedings start. I'm sorry to put a deadline on grief, but I don't have a choice. I walked them to the door. Before they left, Maya turned back to look at me. Do you think Declan will hate me for existing? The question nearly broke me. I don't know, I answered honestly. I don't know how he's going to react to any of this, but I promise I'll try to help him understand that none of this is your fault. After they left, I sat back down in that living room and finally allowed myself to completely fall apart. I cried for the marriage I'd thought I had. I cried for the 34 years I'd invested in a man who'd been lying to me for half of them. I cried for my son, whose entire understanding of his father was about to be destroyed. I cried for Maya, a child who'd lost her father and couldn't even publicly mourn him. And I even cried for Antonella, another woman who'd been deceived by Elliot's carefully constructed lies. But mostly I cried tears of rage at Elliot for being such a coward that he'd maintained this impossible situation for 17 years rather than making a hard choice. Rage at myself for being so blindly trusting that I'd never questioned anything. Rage at the unfairness of being left here to clean up this mess while Elliot got to escape into death without facing any consequences. I picked up my phone and called the one person I knew could help me navigate this nightmare. My college roommate, Patricia, who'd been a family law attorney for 30 years. Patricia, I need your help, I said when she answered. Something's happened, and I don't know what to do. Sutton, are you okay? You sound terrible. I just found out my husband had a second family for 17 years. His mistress and their 16-year-old daughter just showed up at my house asking for a share of his estate. I have 3 weeks to figure out what to do before she files legal action. And I still haven't told Declan any of this. There was a long silence on the other end. Then Patricia said, I'm coming over. Don't do anything. Don't sign anything. Don't promise anything until I get there. I'll be there in an hour. While I waited for Patricia, I did something I'd been avoiding. I opened the flash drive Laurent had given me and started going through all the files systematically, not just glancing at them, but really studying them. There were hundreds of photos spanning Maya's entire life. Elliot teaching her to swim at what looked like 4 or 5 years old. Elliot at her elementary school science fair, holding up her volcano project. Elliot in the audience at her dance recitals, beaming with pride. Elliot helping her build what looked like a robot for some kind of competition. Every major milestone of her childhood, documented and saved on this drive. What struck me most was how happy he looked in these photos. Not guilty, not conflicted, just genuinely joyful. The same expression he'd had in photos with Declan at that age. He'd loved both his children equally, lived fully in both his families, and somehow managed to compartmentalize so completely that neither family had ever suspected the other's existence. The emails were even worse. Years of correspondence between Elliot and Antonella, full of mundane details about Maya's school activities, discussions about parenting decisions, loving messages between partners who were building a life together. It read exactly like the kind of emails I imagined married couples sent each other. Because that's what they'd been. Married in everything but legal paperwork. One email from just 6 months ago caught my attention. Maya asked me again why she can't meet her brother. She's getting older, and the excuses are getting harder. I think I need to tell Sutton the truth soon. This can't go on forever. She deserves to know her brother, and Declan deserves to know her. I've been a coward for too long. 6 months ago, Elliot had been planning to tell me. 6 months ago, he'd apparently decided he couldn't maintain the lie anymore. And then he died before following through, leaving me to discover everything in the worst possible way. Patricia arrived exactly an hour later, carrying her briefcase and a bottle of wine. She took one look at my face and immediately pulled me into a hug. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry." We sat at my kitchen table, and I showed her everything: the photos, the emails, the financial records, Antonella's documentation. Patricia went through it all with her lawyer's eye, making notes, asking questions I couldn't answer. Finally, she sat back. "Okay, here's the situation legally. Maya is Elliot's biological child. The birth certificate and DNA evidence would prove that easily. She's entitled to a portion of his estate under Connecticut law. Typically, children are treated equally in estate distribution unless specifically excluded by a will. Did Elliot have a will?" "Yes," I said. "It leaves everything to me, with provisions for Declan after I die." "Was it written before or after Maya was born?" I thought back. "We updated it about 10 years ago, so after she was born?" Patricia nodded grimly. "That's a problem. He knowingly excluded her from the will, despite being aware of her existence. She can challenge that, argue that she was deliberately hidden and excluded. She has a strong case, Sutton. If this goes to court, she'll almost certainly win some portion of the estate. How much are we talking about? Impossible to say for certain, but typically children inherit equally. So if the court recognizes her, she could be entitled to half of what Declan would receive. Maybe a third of the total estate. Over $1 million. Antonella was asking for over $1 million. "What are my options?" I asked. "You can fight it, claim that Elliot's will should stand as written, but that will be expensive, time-consuming, and you'll probably lose. It'll also drag everything through public court records, which means everyone in Greenwich will know about Elliot's double life. Or you can settle out of court, negotiate an agreement that gives Maya some recognition and financial support without going through litigation. What would you recommend?" Patricia looked at me with sympathy. "Honestly, I'd recommend settling. Not because she deserves it, but because fighting will cost you money, time, and privacy. And more importantly, it'll hurt Declan. Do you really want him to spend months or years in court proceedings where every detail of his father's betrayal is made public record?" She was right. A court battle would be torture for everyone involved, especially Declan and Maya, two innocent people who hadn't asked for any of this. "I need to talk to Declan first," I said. "He needs to know before any decisions are made." "Agreed. But Sutton, you need to prepare yourself. This is going to devastate him. His entire image of his father is about to collapse." I knew she was right, but knowing it and actually doing it were two completely different things. I called Declan that night and told him I needed to see him immediately, that it was urgent and couldn't wait until the weekend. Something in my voice must have alarmed him because he said he'd drive down from Boston first thing in the morning, that he'd cancel his meetings and be there by 10. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the bed I'd shared with Elliot for 34 years, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing different ways to tell our son that his father had been living a lie for half his life. Every version I came up with sounded equally devastating. Declan arrived at 9:45, still wearing his work clothes from the day before, looking exhausted from the early morning drive. He hugged me tightly in the doorway, and I had to fight the urge to tell him to get back in his car and drive away, to stay in his ignorant happiness just a little longer. "Mom, you're scaring me," he said as we sat down in the living room. "What's going on? Are you sick? Is it cancer?" "I'm not sick," I said, "but I need to tell you something about your father, and it's going to be very difficult to hear." Declan's face went pale. "Did he have debts? Was there something illegal? Is someone coming after his estate?" "No, nothing like that." I took a deep breath. 3 days ago, Laurent Beauchamp called me to his office. He'd been doing a routine audit of your father's corporate computer files, and he found something. I pulled out the flash drive. Declan, your father was living a double life for 17 years. He had another family in Seattle, a woman named Antonella and a daughter named Maya. She's 16 years old. For a long moment, Declan just stared at me like I'd started speaking a foreign language. Then he laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. That's not funny, Mom. I know you're still grieving, but that's not... It's true. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop and pulled up the first photo. Elliot with Antonella, her pregnant belly visible under his protective hand. This was taken in March 2008. You were 15 years old. Declan leaned forward, studying the photo. I watched his face cycle through disbelief, confusion, and then slowly, horribly, acceptance. No, there has to be an explanation. Maybe it was before he met you, maybe... Look at the date stamp. I showed him photo after photo, watching my son's world crumble with each image. Elliot holding a newborn. Elliot at birthday parties. Elliot teaching a little girl to ride a bike. Years and years of a parallel life that Declan had known nothing about. I don't understand, Declan said, and his voice cracked. Dad and I were close. We talked all the time. How could he hide something like this from everyone? From me? He was very careful. All those business trips to Seattle, they were real projects, but he used them as cover to visit Antonella and Maya. He maintained 2 complete lives, and he kept them perfectly separate. I showed him the financial records. He was sending her $4,000 a month for 17 years. Declan stood up abruptly, knocking the laptop to the side. You're lying. This is fake. Someone is trying to scam you, trying to get money from Dad's estate by claiming... Laurent found these files on your father's corporate computer. He has no reason to lie, Declan, and there's more. I told him about Antonella's visit, about Maya, about the birth certificate with Elliot's name on it. She came here 2 days ago with Maya. I met them. I saw her. Declan, she looks exactly like your father. Same eyes, same expressions, everything. There's no doubt she's his daughter. My son collapsed back onto the sofa, his face white. I have a sister? Yes, a 16-year-old half-sister who's been living in Seattle her whole life, believing that her father was divorced and that you wanted nothing to do with him. What? Declan looked up sharply. He told her I didn't want to see him. He told her you'd been turned against him in the divorce, that it was too painful for everyone involved. He lied to her just like he lied to us. She grew up thinking she had a brother who hated her father. Declan put his head in his hands. I could see his shoulders shaking, and I moved to sit beside him, putting my arm around him the way I had when he was a little boy with scraped knees and hurt feelings. But this wasn't something I could fix with a Band-Aid and a cookie. How could he do this? Declan's voice was muffled against his hands. I thought we were close. I thought he told me everything. I modeled my whole life after him, Mom. I went into finance because he was so good with numbers and planning. I wanted to be like him. Steady, reliable, honest, and it was all a lie. Not all of it, I said, though the words felt hollow. He did love you. That part was real. Was it? Declan looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. Because if he loved me, he wouldn't have done this to you. He wouldn't have split his time and his attention and his money between 2 families. Every time he missed one of my games or events because of a business trip, was he really with her? With them? I didn't have an answer for that. I'd been asking myself the same questions. There's something else you need to know, I said quietly. Antonella is in financial trouble. Without your father's support, she can't afford to keep Maya in school, or even pay their rent. She's asking for Maya to be recognized as Elliot's daughter and to receive a portion of his estate. Patricia says she has a strong legal case. Declan's jaw tightened. So she wants money. That's what this is really about. It's not that simple. Maya deserves to be acknowledged as your father's daughter. She deserves to inherit from him the same way you do. She didn't choose this situation any more than you did. I don't care what she deserves. Declan stood up, pacing. She's a stranger. Her mother is a homewrecker who knowingly had a relationship with a married man for 17 years. Why should they get anything from Dad's estate? Why should they benefit from destroying our family? Because Maya is your sister, I said firmly. And because fighting this in court will drag everything out publicly. Do you want all of Greenwich knowing your father's secret? Do you want months of legal proceedings where every detail of his double life becomes public record? Because that's what will happen if we contest this. Declan stopped pacing. What do you want to do? I want to settle. Give Maya recognition and a fair portion of the estate. Get this over with as quickly and privately as possible. Patricia thinks we should offer her about a quarter of the total assets, roughly $1 million plus ongoing support for her education. $1 million. Declan laughed bitterly. We're supposed to give $1 million to the product of Dad's affair, the physical evidence of his betrayal. She's not a product or evidence, I said sharply. She's a 16-year-old girl who just lost her father and can't even grieve him properly because her entire existence was a secret. She's your sister, Declan. She has your father's eyes and his mannerisms and his love of science. Like it or not, she's family. She's not my family, Declan shouted. My family was you and Dad and me. That was our family for 32 years. I don't know this girl, and I don't want to know her. You don't mean that. Yes, I do. Declan grabbed his jacket. I need to go. I need to think. I can't be here right now. Declan, please. I'll call you later, Mom. I need time. He left, and I heard his car peel out of the driveway. I sat alone in that living room, surrounded by photos of the family I thought I had, and realized that everything had truly fallen apart. My marriage had been a lie. My son was devastated. And somewhere in Seattle, a teenage girl was waiting to find out if her half-brother would accept her existence or reject her entirely. My phone rang. It was Antonella. Mrs. Radcliffe, I'm sorry to bother you, but I need to know if you've made a decision. My landlord served me with an eviction notice today. I have until the end of the month. End of the month. 3 weeks. 3 weeks to convince my son to accept a sister he never knew existed, to negotiate a settlement that would change all our lives, to somehow find a way forward through this nightmare that Elliot had created and then escaped by dying. I need more time, I said. I don't have more time. I'm sorry, but if I don't hear from you by next Friday with a concrete offer, I'll have to file a petition with the probate court. I don't want to, but Maya deserves to be recognized as Elliot's daughter, and I'm out of options. Next Friday, 7 days. 7 days to save what was left of my family and accept what Elliot's cowardice had destroyed. I'll have an answer for you by Friday, I said, and hung up before she could respond. I looked at the photos still displayed on my laptop screen. Elliot living his double life, perfectly balanced between two families, never choosing, never being honest, just coasting along on lies until his heart literally gave out from the stress of it all. You coward, I whispered to his ghost. You absolute coward. And then I did something I should have done weeks ago. I picked up every photo of Elliot in that living room, and I turned them all face down. I wasn't ready to throw them away. Maybe I never would be, but I couldn't look at his face anymore without seeing the lies behind his smile. Declan didn't call that night, or the next day, or the day after that. I sent him text messages that went unanswered. I left voicemails that weren't returned. On the third day, I called his wife Jennifer, desperate for any information. Sutton, he's not doing well, Jennifer said quietly. He's been sleeping on the couch, barely eating. He won't talk to me about what happened, just keeps saying his whole life was a lie. What exactly did you tell him? I explained everything, the double life, the secret daughter, all of it. Jennifer was silent for a long moment. Oh my God, she finally said. Poor Declan, he worshipped Elliot. This is going to destroy him. I know. But Jennifer, I need him to make a decision. Antonella is filing legal action in 4 days if we don't reach a settlement. This is going to become public record if we don't handle it now. Can you please talk to him? Please get him to at least answer my calls? I'll try, she promised. 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was Declan. I'll meet you at the house tomorrow at 2, he said without preamble. And I want to meet her. Maya. If she's really my sister, I need to see for myself. Are you sure you're ready for that? No. But you're right that we can't let this go to court. I've been thinking about nothing else for 3 days, and I keep coming back to the same conclusion. Dad created this mess, and now we have to clean it up. So let's get it over with. I called Antonella and arranged for her and Maya to come to the house the next day at 2:30. Then I called Patricia and asked her to be there as well, to help mediate and draw up whatever agreement we reached. That night, I barely slept again. I kept imagining all the ways the meeting could go wrong. Declan lashing out at Maya, Antonella making demands we couldn't meet, the whole thing dissolving into accusations and anger. But I also kept thinking about what Laurent had said that first day in his office. This needs to come from you, not from me or anyone else. This was my family, broken and complicated and built on lies, but still mine. And I needed to be the one to hold it together. Declan arrived at 1:30, an hour early. He looked terrible, unshaven, hollow-eyed, like he hadn't slept properly in days. He probably hadn't. I made him coffee, and we sat at the kitchen table, not speaking, just existing in the same space while we waited. I looked her up online, Declan said suddenly. Maya. She has a public Instagram account. Science fair competitions, robotics club, honor roll every semester. She looks like Dad. Exactly like him. Same eyes, same smile, everything. I know. She's smart. Really smart. All her posts are about engineering projects and coding competitions. Dad would have been so proud of her. His voice cracked on the last word. He was proud of her. That's the worst part. He had this whole other daughter who shared his interests, who was brilliant and accomplished, and he got to be proud of her just like he was proud of me. He didn't have to choose. He got to have both of us. I'm sorry, Declan. Are you? He looked at me sharply. Because you seem pretty calm about all of this. Your husband cheated on you for 17 years, had a whole secret child, and you're acting like we're just negotiating a business deal. I'm not calm, I said. I'm devastated. But falling apart doesn't help anyone. And someone needs to be the adult in this situation, since your father isn't here to face the consequences of what he did. You gave up your career for him, Declan said quietly. I never really thought about that before. You had this big marketing job in New York, and you quit to follow him around the country because his career required it. And the whole time, he was sending $4,000 a month to his other family. Money that could have been yours. Time that should have been yours. Yes. How are you not furious? I am furious. I'm so angry I can barely breathe sometimes. But anger isn't going to change anything. It's not going to bring him back so I can scream at him. It's not going to undo 17 years of lies, so I'm focusing on what I can control, which is how we move forward from here. The doorbell rang at exactly 2:30. Patricia had arrived 5 minutes earlier and was already set up in the dining room with her laptop and a stack of legal documents. I took a deep breath and went to answer the door. Antonella looked even more exhausted than she had at our first meeting. Maya stood beside her, wearing a simple blue dress and looking absolutely terrified. Her eyes went immediately to Declan, who had followed me to the door, and I watched both of them freeze as they really saw each other for the first time. The resemblance between them was striking. They had the same coloring, the same build, the same way of standing with slightly hunched shoulders when they were nervous. They were undeniably siblings. Hi, Maya said softly. I'm Maya. Declan. My son's voice was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. We all moved to the dining room where Patricia had set up. It felt absurdly formal. 6 people sitting around the table where I'd hosted countless holiday dinners, about to negotiate the terms of recognizing a secret child and dividing up a dead man's estate. Patricia took charge immediately, which I was grateful for. I've drawn up a proposed settlement agreement based on Connecticut inheritance law and the circumstances of this case. The basic terms are as follows. Maya Scrather Radcliffe will be legally recognized as Elliot Radcliffe's daughter. She will receive 25% of the total estate value, which amounts to approximately $1 million. This includes immediate payment of $300,000 to cover current debts and living expenses, with the remaining $700,000 to be placed in a trust that Maya can access at age 25. Additionally, all educational expenses through undergraduate degree will be covered, including tuition, room and board, and related costs. What about Declan? Antonella asked. What does he receive? Declan will inherit the remaining 75% of the estate, including the house in Greenwich and all retirement accounts. Sutton, as Elliot's widow, retains full ownership of the $2 million life insurance policy, which is separate from the estate division. I watched Antonella's face carefully as Patricia explained the terms. She looked relieved, like she'd been expecting us to offer far less. Maya just looked overwhelmed, staring down at her hands. That's more than fair, Antonella said. Thank you, truly. There are conditions, Patricia continued. This settlement comes with a strict confidentiality agreement. None of the parties will discuss the details of this case publicly or with media. All parties agree to handle this matter with discretion to protect everyone's privacy, particularly the minor child involved. I agree to that, Antonella said immediately. There's one more thing, I said, looking at Maya. I want you to have some of your father's personal effects. Photos, his watch, some of his books about engineering, things that meant something to him. You deserve to have pieces of him, not just money. Maya's eyes filled with tears. Really? Really? You loved him. He was your father. You shouldn't have to pretend he didn't exist in your life. Thank you, Maya whispered. Declan had been silent through all of this, his face unreadable. Now he cleared his throat. I have a condition too. If we're doing this, if we're recognizing her as Dad's daughter, then I want to actually know her. Not just write a check and never see her again. If she's my sister, then she's my sister. That means birthdays and holidays and staying in touch. It means she knows about our family and we know about her life. I'm not interested in having a secret half-sister I never talked to. Both Antonella and Maya looked shocked. I was a little shocked too. This was not what I'd expected from my angry, hurt son. You want to know me? Maya asked, her voice barely audible. I've been thinking about it for 3 days, Declan said, and I keep coming back to the same thing. You and I are the only innocent people in this whole mess. We're the ones who got lied to. We're the ones who didn't choose any of this. Dad made terrible choices, but that's not your fault any more than it's mine. So yeah, I want to know my sister. If you want that too. Maya started crying in earnest now. I've wanted a brother my whole life. Dad used to tell me stories about you, how smart you were, how successful. He said you were everything he wished he could be. I was so jealous that you got to actually know him as a real person, not just as someone who visited on weekends. He told you about me? Declan asked, surprised. All the time. He showed me pictures of your college graduation, your wedding, everything. He carried photos of you in his wallet. I saw them once when I was little. Maya wiped her eyes. I used to imagine what it would be like to meet you, if we'd be friends. But I thought you hated him, hated us. I never imagined this. Declan looked at me, then back at Maya. Dad wasn't perfect, clearly, but he loved us both. That much I believe. He was just too much of a coward to figure out how to love us in the same room. I'm angry at him too, Maya said. I'm so angry that he lied to me about you, about everything, and I'm angry that he died before I could tell him how much he hurt me. But I miss him. I miss him so much it feels like I can't breathe sometimes. Me too, Declan said quietly. I watched my son and his half-sister connect over their shared grief and anger, and something inside me shifted. This wasn't the family I thought I had, but it was the family Elliot had created, for better or worse. And maybe, just maybe, we could build something real out of the wreckage of his lies. Patricia cleared her throat gently. If everyone is in agreement with these terms, we can sign today. Sutton, Declan, and Antonella as Maya's legal guardian will all need to sign. Once signed, I'll file the necessary paperwork to have Maya officially recognized as Elliot's daughter, and the financial transfers can begin immediately. I want to add something, I said. Maya, you're welcome here, in this house. I know it's complicated, but this was your father's home too. Even if you never got to visit while he was alive, you should be able to see where he lived, where he spent the other half of his time. If you want to, you can come visit. You can stay in the guest room. You can see his office, look at his things, learn about the life he had here. Antonella looked stunned. You'd do that? After everything? I'm not doing it for you, I said honestly. I'm doing it for her. She deserves to know her father's full story, not just half of it. And she deserves to know her brother. I looked at Declan. If that's okay with you? It's more than okay, Declan said. Actually, Maya, what are you doing for Thanksgiving? Because it's in 3 weeks and you should be there. You should meet Jennifer, my wife. You should be part of the family. Maya looked at her mother, who nodded slowly. We'd like that. Thank you. We spent the next hour signing papers, with Patricia explaining each document carefully. When it was done, Maya was officially recognized as Elliot Radcliffe's daughter. The financial arrangements were settled. The secret was no longer a secret, at least not within our small circle. After Patricia left, the four of us sat in the living room with coffee and tea, and for the first time, we really talked. Maya told us about growing up in Seattle, about her school, about her dreams of studying aerospace engineering at MIT, the same school her father had attended. Declan told her about his job in Boston, about how he'd always felt pressure to live up to Dad's example, about how he was now questioning everything he thought he knew about what that example meant. Antonella mostly stayed quiet, but at one point she said, "I want you both to know that I'm genuinely sorry. Not for loving Elliot, I won't apologize for that, but for not being stronger, for not walking away when I realized he was never going to leave. For raising Maya in this situation where she had to hide half her life. I should have protected her better." "You did the best you could," I said, and I meant it. We all did. Elliot was the one who made impossible choices that hurt everyone. We were all just trying to survive his decisions. As the afternoon turned to evening, Maya asked if she could see Elliot's office. I led her upstairs to the small room where he'd spent countless hours working on projects and designs. His desk was still exactly as he'd left it. Papers scattered around, a coffee mug with a ring stain, his favorite engineering textbooks on the shelf. Maya ran her fingers along the spines of the books. He had the same ones at home, in the apartment in Seattle. I used to sneak in there and try to read them when I was little, even though I didn't understand anything. "He would have loved that," I said. "He would have loved that you inherited his curiosity." "Did he talk about me? Here, I mean. Did you ever hear my name?" I wanted to lie, to spare her feelings, but she deserved the truth. "No, I never knew you existed until a week ago." He kept his lives completely separate. "That must have been exhausting," Maya said, remembering what he told to whom, never mixing up details, never accidentally mentioning the wrong name. The letter Laurent showed me said the stress was literally killing him. His blood pressure was dangerously high. The guilt was eating him alive. "Good," Maya said fiercely. "He should have felt guilty. He should have suffered for what he did to all of us." "He did. And then he died before he could make it right. So now we're left here, trying to figure out how to be a family when the person who connected us is gone." Maya turned to look at me, and in her eyes I saw Elliot, the same intensity, the same intelligence, the same capacity for deep feeling. "Can I ask you something? Do you hate me for existing?" "No," I said, and realized I meant it. "I hate what your existence represents, the lies, the betrayal, the years of deception. But I don't hate you. You're just a kid who loved her father. That's not something to hate. But I took half his time, half his attention, money that should have been yours. That wasn't your choice. That was his. You were a child. You don't get to take responsibility for an adult's terrible decisions." I paused. "Maya, I need you to understand something. What your father did was wrong. How he handled this situation was cowardly and selfish. But the fact that he loved you, that he showed up for you as much as he could within the impossible situation he created, that part was real. You're allowed to love him and be angry at him at the same time. Are you? Angry at him, furious, absolutely furious, but also heartbroken. Because I loved who I thought he was, and grieving that person while also hating what he actually did is complicated." We stood there in Elliot's office, two women connected by a dead man's lies, and somehow found an understanding. This wasn't forgiveness. It was too soon for that. Might always be too soon. But it was acceptance. Acceptance that this was our reality now, and we could either destroy each other fighting it or find a way to move forward together. When we came back downstairs, Declan and Antonella were looking at photo albums. Pictures of Declan as a child that Antonella had never seen. Pictures of family vacations and Christmas mornings and all the moments that made up a life. "He looks happy in these," Antonella said quietly. "I always worried that he was miserable here, that he stayed out of obligation. But he looks genuinely happy." "He was happy," I said. "That's what makes this so hard. It wasn't a bad marriage that drove him to you. It was just, I don't know, cowardice, inability to choose, wanting everything without accepting that you can't have everything." Declan closed the album. I think we should go to his grave, all of us, together. Are you sure? I asked. Yeah. Maya never got to say goodbye. She deserves that. And honestly, I have some things I need to say to him too. So the four of us drove to the cemetery, where Elliot had been buried 6 weeks earlier. It was getting dark, the October air cold and sharp. We stood around his grave, his wife, his son, his mistress, his secret daughter, and one by one, we spoke to him. Declan went first. I loved you, Dad. I still love you, but I'm so disappointed in you. You taught me to be honest, to be reliable, to be a man of integrity, and the whole time, you were living a lie. I don't know how to reconcile those two versions of you. I don't know if I ever will. But I'm going to try to be better than you were. I'm going to try to be honest, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Maya was crying too hard to speak for a moment. When she finally could, she said, "You were the best dad I could have asked for, except for the part where you lied about everything. I wish you'd been brave enough to tell the truth. I wish I'd gotten to know Declan while you were alive. I wish a lot of things. But mostly, I just wish you were still here so I could yell at you for being such a coward." Antonella simply said, "I loved you. I shouldn't have, but I did. Rest in peace, Elliot." Then they all looked at me. I stared at the headstone, at Elliot's name carved in granite, and felt the weight of 34 years of marriage pressing down on me. "I don't forgive you," I said finally. "I don't know if I ever will, but I'm going to take care of what you left behind. I'm going to make sure your children know each other, that they have a relationship despite your lies. I'm going to move forward with my life, figure out who Sutton Radcliffe is when she's not just Elliot's wife. And someday, maybe, I'll remember the good parts without the shadow of your betrayal coloring everything. But not today. Today I'm just angry that you left me to clean up your mess." We stood there in silence for a few more minutes, then walked back to the cars together. Tomorrow, we'd start figuring out the logistics of blending these broken pieces into something resembling a family. But tonight, we'd said what needed to be said. As I drove home alone, I realized something. Elliot had spent 17 years trying to keep his two worlds separate, terrified of them colliding and destroying everything. And in the end, they had collided. But instead of destruction, there was possibility. The possibility that Declan and Maya could build a real sibling relationship. The possibility that honesty, however painful, was better than comfortable lies. The possibility that I could rebuild my life on truth instead of illusions. The old Sutton would have done anything to protect the perfect image of her marriage, to hide the scandal, to pretend everything was fine. But the old Sutton had died along with Elliot and his lies. The new Sutton was done pretending. Thanksgiving came 3 weeks later, and for the first time in 34 years, I hosted the holiday without Elliot. But the dining room table wasn't empty. Declan and Jennifer arrived Wednesday evening, helping me prepare the traditional dishes I'd been making for decades. And on Thursday morning, Antonella and Maya drove down from their new apartment, a modest 2-bedroom in Stamford that the settlement money had allowed them to afford, closer to Greenwich, closer to family. I'd worried about how awkward it would be, having Elliot's mistress in my home for a major holiday. But Antonella stayed in the kitchen with me while the others watched football in the living room, and we worked side by side in companionable silence. She was surprisingly good at cooking, better than me, actually, and she showed me a Brazilian recipe for farofa that she said Elliot had loved. "He used to request it every time I made turkey," she said quietly, toasting the cassava flour in butter. Said it reminded him of a project he'd worked on in São Paulo before we met. I could have resented this shared knowledge, this intimacy she'd had with my husband. Instead, I found myself curious. What else did he like that I didn't know about? Antonella smiled sadly. He loved watching old science fiction movies. Not the new ones, the cheesy ones from the 50s and 60s. We used to have movie nights every Sunday he was with us, just the three of us on the couch with popcorn, watching terrible special effects and laughing. He told me he hated science fiction, I said, surprised. We always watched British mysteries because he said space movies were ridiculous. Maybe he was a different person in different places. Maybe he showed us both pieces of himself, but never the whole picture. It was an uncomfortable truth, but probably accurate. Elliot had been whoever he needed to be to maintain both lives. And now we were left trying to assemble a complete picture from fractured pieces. In the living room, I could hear Declan explaining football rules to Maya, who apparently had never watched a game before. She was asking him incredibly technical questions about the physics of passing trajectories, and he was laughing, telling her she was going to be terrifying when she got to MIT. "They're good together," Antonella said, noticing where my attention had gone. I was worried Declan would resent her, but he's been amazing. He calls her twice a week just to check in. "He's a good person," I said. Despite learning that his role model was living a lie, he's choosing to be better than that, to be honest and present and real. "He learned that from you, not Elliot." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I focused on basting the turkey. Dinner was strange, but not unbearable. We sat around the table, 6 of us, where there used to be 3 or 4, and there was an empty chair where Elliot should have been. Jennifer, bless her, broke the tension by asking Maya about her robotics competition, and that launched an enthusiastic explanation of autonomous vehicle programming that lasted through most of the meal. "Dad would have loved this," Maya said at one point, then stopped, looking stricken. "Sorry, I know we're not supposed to." "It's okay," I said. "He's still your father. You're allowed to mention him." "Are you allowed to miss him?" Maya asked quietly. "Even after everything he did?" I thought about it, really thought about it. I miss who I thought he was. I miss the comfort of my old life, even though it was built on lies. I miss feeling secure and loved and like I understood my place in the world. But the actual man, the one who lied for 17 years, I don't think I ever really knew him well enough to miss him properly. "That's the worst part," Declan added. "Realizing you're grieving someone who didn't actually exist, like mourning a character in a book instead of a real person." We were all silent for a moment, united in our complicated grief. "I want to propose something," Jennifer said, always the practical one. "I think we should start a new tradition, not to replace anything, but to acknowledge that this is a new family configuration now. What if every year, on the anniversary of Elliot's death, we all get together? Not to celebrate him, but to celebrate us, to acknowledge that we survived his mess and built something real out of it." "I like that," Maya said immediately. "Me too," Antonella agreed. Declan looked at me. "Mom, I think it's a good idea, but I have a condition. We tell the truth. At these gatherings, we don't pretend Elliot was perfect or that this situation is simple. We acknowledge the complexity, the hurt and the healing, the anger and the love, all of it." "Deal," everyone agreed. After dinner, while Declan and Jennifer were doing dishes and Antonella was helping Maya with some engineering homework at the dining room table, I slipped outside to the back porch. The November air was cold, but I needed a moment alone. Laurent Beauchamp had called me the day after the settlement was signed. He'd offered me a job, not a pity job, but a real position as Director of Corporate Relations for Devereaux Aerospace. He said the company needed someone who understood the culture, who could bridge the gap between the technical teams and the business side, who had experience in marketing and communications, someone who could rebuild her career at 57 if she wanted to. I'd told him I needed time to think about it. But standing on that porch, watching through the window as my expanded, complicated, broken, and healing family laughed over some joke I couldn't hear, I realized I was ready. Ready to be something other than Elliot's widow. Ready to reclaim the career I'd abandoned 30 years ago. Ready to be Sutton Radcliffe, not as someone's wife, but as myself. The back door opened and Maya came out, wrapping her arms around herself against the cold. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Yeah, just thinking." "About him?" "About me, actually, about what comes next." Maya leaned against the railing beside me. "Can I ask you something? And you can tell me if it's too personal." "Go ahead. Do you think you'll ever date again? Like, find someone new?" The question surprised me. "I don't know. I'm 57 years old. Most of my adult life was spent with one person. The idea of starting over with someone else is terrifying. But you're not dead. You could have, 20 or 30 more years. That's a long time to be alone, just because my dad was an idiot." I laughed despite myself. "Your dad was definitely an idiot. But I think for now, I need to figure out who I am on my own. I went from my parents' house to college to marriage. I've never really been just me." "I think you're pretty cool just being you," Maya said. "I mean, you could have hated me. You had every right to. But instead, You're letting me be part of this family, even though I'm a reminder of the worst thing that ever happened to you. You're not a reminder of the worst thing. You're a person. A smart, kind person who got dealt a terrible hand and is handling it with more grace than most adults would. I paused. And you're Declan's sister, which makes you my family too, in a weird way. Can I hug you? Maya asked. Is that allowed? I opened my arms, and this 16-year-old girl who was my husband's secret daughter fell into them. She cried, and I held her, and it was strange and painful and healing all at once. When we went back inside, Antonella was getting ready to leave. She lived close enough now that she didn't need to stay over, which honestly made things easier. As I walked them to the door, she turned to me. Thank you, Sutton, for everything. For not making this a war, for including Maya, for being so much bigger than this situation demanded. I didn't do it for you, I said honestly. I did it for them. I nodded toward Declan and Maya, who were exchanging phone numbers for some video game they apparently both played. I know, but still, thank you. After they left, Declan and Jennifer stayed for another hour, and we sat in the living room with tea, processing the strange day we'd just had. That was weird, right? Declan asked. Like, objectively weird. So weird, Jennifer agreed. But also kind of nice. Maya's sweet, and Antonella was more normal than I expected. She's not a monster, I said. None of them are monsters. Your father created an impossible situation, and we're all just trying to navigate it. How are you so calm about this? Declan asked, the same question he'd asked me weeks ago. How are you not falling apart? I fell apart privately, I said. In this house, alone, for weeks. I screamed and cried and threw things. I had my breakdown, but that doesn't help anyone, so now I'm choosing to move forward. Laurent offered me a job, a real job at Devereaux. I'm thinking about taking it. Mom, that's amazing. Declan looked genuinely excited. You should absolutely take it. Get back to work, rebuild your career. Show Dad's ghost that you're more than just the wife he left behind. That's exactly what I want to do. After they left, I walked through the house, turning off lights. I paused in Elliot's office, which I'd mostly avoided since his death. His desk was still cluttered with his things. His coffee mug still sat on the coaster I'd bought him for Christmas 5 years ago. I started packing it up, not throwing things away. Maya might want more of his belongings eventually, but boxing it up, clearing the space. This could be my office now, my workspace for the new job, my room in my house that I could finally make fully mine. At the bottom of a desk drawer, I found another photo I'd never seen before. It was old, the edges worn, and it showed all of us, me, Elliot, and Declan on one side, Antonella, Elliot, and Maya on the other. Except they were clearly two separate photos that had been cut and taped together. Elliot in the middle of both, trying to hold two families in his hands, unable to let either go. I stared at that photo for a long time. Then I carefully cut Elliot out of both sides and threw his image away. I took the two remaining pieces, my family and Antonella's family, and laid them side by side without him in the middle. Two families that could exist independently, that could even exist together now that the lies were gone. That's what I taped to the inside of the desk drawer. A reminder that we didn't need Elliot to be a family. We'd found our own way through his betrayal and come out connected by something stronger than his lies. Truth, forgiveness, and the choice to be better than the worst thing that happened to us. 6 months later, I started my job at Devereaux Aerospace. Maya got accepted to MIT's early admission program with a full scholarship. Declan and Jennifer announced they were expecting their first child. And Antonella started dating someone new, an engineer she met at work who knew her whole story and loved her anyway. As for me, I was 58 years old and finally figuring out who Sutton Radcliffe was when she wasn't defined by someone else. I was a corporate director, a mother, an unexpected stepmother-adjacent person to a brilliant teenager, and someday soon, a grandmother. I was healing. We all were. Not because Elliot's betrayal didn't matter, but because we refused to let it destroy us. He'd made terrible choices that hurt everyone he claimed to love. But we were making different choices, choosing honesty over comfort, connection over resentment, healing over hatred. The story of Elliot's double life was a tragedy, but the story of what came after, The story of a broken family rebuilt on truth instead of lies. That was something different. That was survival. That was grace. That was us, writing our own ending to a story someone else had tried to tell. And every morning when I woke up in that house in Greenwich, in the bed I'd once shared with a man who lived a lie, I chose to get up anyway. I chose to keep going. I chose to live. That was my revenge. That was my triumph. Not destroying the people Elliot had hurt, but helping them, helping us build something real from the wreckage. 6 weeks after my husband died, his boss called me with a trembling voice to reveal a truth that shattered everything. But that truth, as devastating as it was, also set me free. Free to be angry, free to grieve, free to rebuild, free to finally, after 58 years, discover who I really was. And that discovery was just beginning.